Hey, what's up? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. I'm Norm, along with Mike. It is Thursday, January 27th, 2022. The Leafs coming off a 4-3 shootout win over the Ducks at a spectatorless Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. The Leafs are 7-2-1 in their past 10, among the 10 best teams in the league. Top power play, top 4 penalty kill. But the team still has a glaring vulnerability in that it cannot get a lead and lock it down. Michael, why should we continue to go on about this to the degree that we do?
Good morning, Norm. Well, first, it's not just us. You can say, well, fans and observers, the team has constantly been up 3-1. And like through that 6-game road trip, they were up 3-1, I think, in 5 of the 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then last night against Anaheim, up 3-1 and below the lead. And they've done that consistently over this stretch. The concern is that either they're sitting back, they're being passive, or they're not getting the goaltending that they got earlier in the year, and they're bleeding points. They had a 4-1 lead against Colorado, lost in overtime. They had a lead against Vegas. They had a lead against St. Louis. They had a lead against the Rangers. They didn't do it against the Islanders, and now they did it against Anaheim. And these are all good teams, but you can't, when you're against a good opponent, once you have the lead, you need to strangle them. You need to choke them out. And the Leafs don't seem to be able right now to be able to do that. Now, it's a question of whether that's just on the goaltending situation, but I think it's an overall team thing where they seem to sort of relax a little bit. And last night they were up 3-1. They scored 3 power play goals. Mm-hmm. They had 5-on-3. They scored on that one. Tavares with a nice goal, and they tried desperately and had a couple really good chances to make it 4-1 on the remaining 5-on-4 power play. And then they get caught late in that power play, and Silfverberg comes down and makes it 3-2. And as soon as you saw that, you essentially, no matter how well they played in the third period, you said Anaheim's gonna tie this game up. And John Gibson played fantastic, and Shattenkirk ties up the game. And then, they win in the shootout. But the point here is that, they blew that lead. And in the playoffs, you cannot afford, if you have a 2-goal lead at any point, you cannot afford to let that team come back. And it's a trend that I think, Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas are going to have to address either before the deadline or before the playoffs, because they're going to play a Florida or a Tampa or a Boston or a Pittsburgh in the first round of wherever they finish. And you cannot let those teams breathe if you have the advantage on them.
This is the Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, OakRidgeFord.com. We are on the tip of seeing a ton of new 2022 product landing on the lot. Escape, Edge, Explorer, of course, F-150. I just did a deal with an OG, and he is really excited about the truck we ordered for him. I can help you out too. I'm right here. If you are looking for a vehicle, no matter where you are, especially in Canada, all you got to do is reach out to me, the Leafs Convo at gmail.com, norm.james@oakridgeford.com. I am here to help you. I am dead serious, and we will definitely get something done. A lot of times when people get out into the landscape of car dealerships and the market, there's a concern. You get your backup. You're worried that somebody's going to take you for a ride. You don't want to trust anybody. I'm your guy. Do it with me, and I will usher you through the process. It'll be seamless and a lot of fun to boot. Mike, how do the Leafs overcome this incapability of holding leads? Like, is this a situation where we have to see this team lock it down and get serious and hold leads and win games convincingly before they get into the playoffs? Or regardless of what happens, we are still headed for a date with another playoff chance and another playoff opportunity that we can't be so sure about, but that will be the litmus test. That will be the the benchmark for this team. Doesn't matter what happens in the regular season. They've got to get back to the playoffs, win by hook or by crook. But obviously to win, you've got to be able to be confident when you have a lead.
Well, I'll say this. If they remain playing the way that they're playing right now, which I don't think is fast and loose, but it's not good enough. You see teams like Florida, and they win in different ways. Florida's a powerhouse offense right now, and they're getting good goaltending from Bobrovsky, and Tampa Bay has got the Stanley Cup pedigree and the players that they do. So you don't have to worry about them turning it on when it comes time. With the Leafs, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if they play this way right now, I think it's a 50-50 proposition of them winning in the first round of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And playing Florida or Tampa, those teams are just as talented as the Leafs. So they've got to be able to play a better defensive game and take advantage of the fact that they can score goals, and once they score goals and once they get in the lead, to be able to batten down the hatches. Now, part of that is improvement on the blue line. Part of that is getting good goaltending. And like I told you, Jack Campbell, even though he got I think it was his 20th win yesterday. He's one of the league's top goaltenders. But if you look at after that ridiculous streak that the Leafs had in November, where they just won everything, and
sure.
And Campbell was fantastic, and he has ridden that to an all-star berth or an all-star selection, and probably he would have been one of the top 3 for the U.S. at the Olympics if the NHL had gone to the Olympics. Right now, since December the 1st, he's 8-2-2, which is a great record. His goals against is over 3, and his save percentage is under 900. So those are below average statistics. Now you can say the reason for that is because he had to play a lot more games than anybody thought, and that's understandable. Maybe there's some mental fatigue there, but he's basically, he's gotten a lot of rest over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously with he got, I believe he was one that had COVID and he recovered, and that's got to be factored in. But he didn't play for an entire week before playing last night, and he wasn't busy last night, and he really didn't play well until the shootout. You're going to see, and with the schedule that is in front of them in February, where after the All-Star break, they're going to play, I think, 11 games in 17 days. You're going to see a healthy dose of Peter Mrazek. You're going to have to, because they can't play Campbell every night, even when there's games in between. I think you're going to see basically a rotation, which is what they planned all along, because Mrazek played well against the Islanders. I think it's going to be Campbell one night, Mrazek the next, Campbell the next night, and they're going to rotate them, because otherwise they have to take advantage of their strength in goal with Mrazek playing the way he can play, because some teams are really going to be behind the 8 ball if they have a backup who's not good, because they're going to have to play those guys a lot.
So the use of Mrazek ginning up is out of necessity and out of preservation for the number one, who is really, he's settling into the role in more ways than one. It's not just like he's winning easily and it's like second nature. He's going to settle into the role, taking these dips, right, Mike? I mean, the Leafs still have the fewest goals against in the Atlantic Division. The numbers aren't terrible. The Leafs are winning, but the problem here is, Mike, is the team goes up 4-1. Jack Campbell's in net, then he gives up 2-3 more goals, and they win in overtime. They win in the shootout. They win late. So he's given more goals, which inflates his goals against. Yet he still gets the win. It's all part of the process for Jack, and anyone who's watching this podcast. You have to understand where Mike and I are coming from, and I'm sure you share a lot of the same feelings in that. In totality, there are more positives with this team than negatives, and it is pushing along at a decent pace. I mean, we've seen improvements with the penalty kill and the power play. It looks great, but there are other issues now. And if you're going to win a Stanley Cup, the whole package has to come to fruition in terms of running at top level. And one thing is great, another thing leaves more to be desired. It's all part of growing into a winner and then a playoff winner and then a champion. The key for us, though, is to keep our spirits high and our expectations tempered based on the history of this team.
Yeah, and it's not all on Campbell. I don't want that to be misinterpreted by people watching. It's like it's not all on Campbell. Campbell has had moments where he's played really well, but giving up 5 goals against Colorado and
Yep.
5 goals against St. Louis. I mean, these are tough teams. 6 goals or 5 goals against the Rangers. It's also on the team in front of them, especially the defense, which in the last week has had to play without Jake Muzzin, and that brings another thing into focus, which I think we need to talk about, which is the blue line, which is a constant when it comes to the Leafs because it's constantly been an area that they've needed to address.
Mm-hmm.
The top pairing is great. Riley and Brody, they finally found the right complementary top pairing guy for Morgan Riley. That's fine. But with the injury to Muzzin, and then Justin Hall was out with COVID. It revealed, a problem which we've seen in the playoffs where somebody gets hurt and then all of a sudden the domino effect is, and then you're playing Travis Dermott 20 minutes. And I'm sorry, Travis Dermott is not a good enough defenseman, and I don't think is going to end up being a good enough defenseman to play in a top 4 role. So again, this is really the big issue with Kyle Dubas in the sense that he needs to upgrade the blue line before the trade deadline, and we'll probably have to give up assets to do it. And it's going to be difficult because they don't have a lot of cap space, but that's not the biggest problem. And Chris Johnston just reported this on the Toronto Star in his column. With the border restrictions, getting a player to come to Canada, even if they're Canadian, might be an issue. Because what happened with Zach Bogosian last year. Zach Bogosian signed with the Leafs. I don't think his family ever came to Canada. And after last year, with all the border restrictions, he ended up re-signing in Tampa for less money because he was tired of what was good. Now, this is not under the control of the Leafs, but this is another thing that they're going to have to deal with, where they're going to have to find a player not only who fits what their need is, which is a right-hand defenseman in the top 4. They're going to have to find a player, if it's a player playing in the U.S., that's willing to come to Canada, unless they don't have any kind of no trade, no move restrictions. So that's another hurdle. But I know that there are I know at least one player that has been rumored that they have interest in. That wouldn't be a question because he's already playing for a Canadian-based team.
And who is that?
That's Ben Chiarot.
Okay.
Now, this is the thing that, and I contacted a friend who covered the Jets for years in Winnipeg, and Chiarot is a left-hand shot, but he's played the right side. So that would potentially be a fit on that second pairing with Jake Muzzin. I don't know about the speed of that second pairing because Chiarot isn't exactly, Cale Makar in terms of being fleet of foot, but he's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be a physical second pairing. But Montreal is going to expect a first-round pick at least for Chiarot. And CJ reported a couple days ago on TSN's Insiders that the Leafs may be looking for somebody that has term on their contract rather than a rental, because they gave up their first in the Foligno deal last year, which is a rental, and have nothing to show for it. So if it's a player who is somebody with term left, there are a couple candidates out there. I know that Damon Severson from the New Jersey Devils has been mentioned. He's a $4.1 million cap hit, and that's going to be difficult to fit. So there are a number of options, but the direction of where the Leafs have to go is clear. I think they have enough depth and flexibility at forward, although they'll always be willing to, if they can get somebody inexpensively, they'd be willing to add somebody. But on defense, if Jake Muzzin goes down like he's gone down the last 2 years, and all of a sudden you're going to have to play, Rasmus Sandin, who's 21 years old, and Timothy Liljegren, who's 21 or 22, in a top 4 role in a playoff scenario, I don't know. They don't have the experience right now to handle that, and they might get their lunch handed to them. Those guys playing bottom pairing, playing protected minutes, playing 13, 14, 15 minutes in a playoff scenario, I think you could get away with that. Playing them 20, 22, 23 minutes and overloading Riley and Brody, that's a recipe for disaster.
So we have the guy out of Montreal potentially. I mean, he was difficult to deal with during the playoffs, Leafs Habs last spring, and we know the result of that. Who else would you say the Leafs have on their radar that the general fan can identify with and get somewhat excited about the prospects of a potential acquisition?
And the other thing with Chiarot is that apparently when he was a free agent, the Leafs were in on him,
Yep.
but he chose to sign with Montreal. Another name that I've sort of focused on, and again, this will be an issue in terms of salary and whether the team is going to trade him because they want to sign him as well as a rental, would be Rasmus Delane, and the former Sabre, who's now with Philadelphia. Philadelphia yesterday basically said, we're more concerned about next year and getting our players back for next. They didn't put the for sale sign on, but they may as well have, because they've lost 13 games in a row and they're really a tire fire right now. They want to sign Ristolainen, but he's a big right-handed, tough defenseman who knows the Atlantic Division. The analytics people hate him because his underlying numbers are not good. I don't give a crap about that. I've seen the guy play.
Yep.
He eats minutes. He's tough. He can penalty kill. He could play the power play in a pinch.
Yep.
I think he's a good defenseman. And you're not talking about keeping him for multiple years. You're talking about a rental. So if they go the rental route, that Ristolainen would be somebody I would check in on. But if you believe, and I have no reason not to believe what Chris reported, if they're looking for guys with term, a guy like Severson makes a lot of sense because he's young enough and he's locked up for another year. That's similar to what they did with Muzzin. Muzzin had another year on his contract when they made the trade with LA. But the problem is when if they got involved in the Jacob Chikrin sweepstakes, which I've heard in passing they may have checked in on, you're talking multiple draft picks and prospects for a guy like that. And I don't know whether that's a direction and a cost that they really want to go towards.
You've got many things to consider, right? You have assets now that can pay dividends for you in the long term that you may have to move out in order to bring back something of a temporary presence, right? Temporary results. Where are the Leafs in the chronology of an organization that's moving forward to making a major statement, right? And that's the thing, because you will have fans and you will have people of the mindset that whatever happens this year is just all part of the evolution of this group and the franchise. And if they don't win, no problem. There will be next year and a year after that. And I'm not trying to be condescending about it, but we do know that for as much as there's always next year, there really isn't next year, because the organization will live on in infamy forever. But guys like Kyle Dubas and his staff may be up against the clock, and it's not something they're talking about, but they may have to govern and make decisions that result in more rapid to happen for them in a beneficial way than long term, for the sake of just maintaining employment with the Maple Leafs. You know what I'm saying?
I continue to waver back and forth about whether this is a scenario where Dubas is going to say, I'm going all in. I would think that that's the case, because I can't perceive of him keeping his job. I'm not saying this with any kind of particular glee, because I like the job that Kyle Dubas has done. They just haven't had the results when it counts. But I think his scouting and his drafting and what he's done under the salary cap has been really, really good overall. But you're talking about 5 years between him and Lou Lamoriello of them losing in the first round. And how many years do you go before there's some price to pay? Now, I thought, okay, this is it. This is it. This is the year. If they don't get past the first round, he's done. But then I look at the options out there in terms of who they would bring in if they did. Jim Rutherford's been hired in Vancouver. Jeff Gordon's been hired in Montreal. Anaheim's going to hire a GM, so is Chicago. Philadelphia may end up hiring a general manager if they fire Chuck Fletcher. There are not a ton of really experienced top-end general managers unless it's somebody who's with an existing club. And I think Dubas has done a pretty good job. It's just, again, they need to perform when they need to perform.
Yeah.
And if they don't, is MLS and you going to say, okay, Shanahan, Dubas, you're out of here. Keefe, you're out of here, and let's start afresh. But you're starting with the same group of play. I'm starting to be of the opinion, Norm, that if they lose in the first round again, that Dubas may stay, and that finally the core gets tinkered with, because Dubas's mantra has been, we're going to keep this group because this group, is going to eventually perform. And if they don't perform this year when it counts, then something has got to be changed. Then the construct of the team has to be changed. But I don't know now. I'm not 100% sure that if they lose in the first round, that there are major changes with the hierarchy at MLS and the Leafs.
Yeah, and there's no acrimony that we know of that filters from the top down, and players having knock them down, drag them out, disagreements with managers. That's not the issue. If there were, it's easier to remove the coaching staff and the management than it is to exile all the players and then replace them. But in this circumstance, it may be easier to replace the talent on the ice, maybe not apples to apples, but overall move out, bring back, and continue on with the philosophy, than it would be to remove Kyle Dubas, who's, again, for as many people who think that he is the greatest person who's ever walked the face of the earth with the greatest brain, sure, but he's still finding his way in this league. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to invest in the way the ownership has, only to get to the point where he's really starting to face adversity and growing, and then to can him and have him go somewhere else and be an assistant general manager somewhere else. So it may be easier just to have him stay in place for no matter how deep the Leafs get in the playoffs, or even if they fizzle out in the first round, or they go all the way to the championship, who knows? Easier to keep him and let him make the adjustments as this team tries to navigate its way forward to become a champion. Because look, every other organization worth its weight goes through this process and then gets into the playoffs, makes a mark, falls short, and then overcomes. And if the Leafs forget the drought, forget the ghosts of Harold Ballard and all that stuff, if this team aspires to do that, from the ownership to the management, the coach, to the players, then collectively somebody has to keep the train on the tracks moving forward. And if that's Kyle Dubas over the players, and we can all believe it, then so be it. Mike, just a few more points. I wanted to make a comment about the potential shifting of the dynamic on the defensive end. If Muzzin's hurt and the team is short-handed quality bodies, that may change the way Kyle Dubas approaches the deadline and whom he may go after, as opposed to bringing in a cherry on top kind of guy who can complement a group. Someone may have to be brought in just to fill a hole, and that's not a good thing.
No, that's not a good thing. And there were concerns about Muzzin having a concussion, but I know that he had practiced the last couple of days. He was having neurological tests to confirm that he was okay, and that he probably will be back against Detroit on Saturday. That being said, like I said, he's been hurt the last 2 years in the playoffs. Players get hurt in the playoffs, and they don't have the safety net of having a Zach Bogosian on the bottom pairing to be a penalty killer. I mean, they've been using Timothy Liljegren as a penalty killer, and I don't think he's done a bad job. But what I'm saying is, in a playoff scenario, you probably want more veteran depth to be able to fall back on. The smart thing for them to do, and I think they're going to do this, is play these guys, meaning Sandin and Liljegren, play them the next 30 to 40 games and find out and get an idea of whether they can handle, the crucible of the NHL postseason. They need to find that out. Now, they have a ton of games before March the 21st, and if they find out that they're capable of doing that, then I think they're still going to add a veteran defenseman, but maybe it won't be it'll be more of a bottom pairing guy than a top four guy. But
Mike, Terry 3G, last thing the Leafs need to do is bring in another veteran GM like Lou and mess up the team. Right now they're on the right track. I thought he was referring to a veteran defenseman, but it's not so much like veteran. Again, if the Kyle Dubas era were to end tomorrow, they bring in who's available and who they think is going to further advance the cause. If he's 70, if he's 80, this isn't a boomer versus millennial thing. This is who's available and who can take this team to the next. If they could bring back King Clancy from the dead and have King Clancy lead this team to a championship, you'd have people ripping on him on Twitter for being a fossil and not alive. But he takes him to the championship. It's who's available and who has the philosophy. This young versus old thing. I think it's. I mean, we've made a lot out of it ourselves. But if it's all 20-somethings available to take this team to the next level after Kyle Dubas is booted, then those are your people. But if it's somebody with lots of experience who's available, who you believe can finally remedy this thing, then you go for that person. Doesn't matter what their age is.
Had he not been hired in Vancouver, Jim Rutherford would have been tops on the list. He'd won 3 Stanley Cups with Carolina and Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
former Leaf, but he's not available now because he's the president in Vancouver.
Yeah.
The problem is that, okay, if you fire Dubas, who are you going to replace him with? Ray Chiarot? I mean, there are a few general managers out there that aren't employed right now. You want to bring in Peter Chiarelli or bring in Mark Bergevin or some of those, it's not going to be Stan Bowman because obviously, but you know what I'm saying? It's like the pickings right now. I think Dubas is a more viable option to stay and to make the changes than to bring in somebody else. But between now and March the 21st, I think people recognize that the weak spot on this team, and I don't know whether it can be remedied by trade, but the weak spot on this team is defense. And what Chris Johnston reported makes a lot of sense. We don't want to give away a first-round pick for a quick fix, for a stopgap. We want to get value for the first, meaning somebody who helps us for multiple years. That's what Muzzin did when they traded for him in 2019. They got that year and the following year. They're probably looking for somebody who's at least got another year on their contract, maybe 2, and that would be worthwhile to give up a first-round pick, and maybe even more than a first-round pick might be a prospect. Mm-hmm. But that's what you have to do because you need to improve this team not just for this year, but for multiple years.
So, Cameron Gilchrist, how did the new lines look last night? I'd like to know your opinion. At the end of the day, it really didn't matter because the Leafs scored 3 power play goals, which is a good thing in and of itself. Right. But what was your takeaway from the reconfiguration?
But they didn't score 5 on 5. So that's the thing. It's like, and I know that Keefe, in offensive zone faceoffs, he would substitute Matthews or Tavares for Camp, who's more of a defensive specialist. So really, I mean, they played with, they were a little more feisty, I think, in terms of forechecking, but it didn't really work because none of them scored. You can say that they drew penalties, and because they drew penalties, they get the power play opportunities. But no, this team needs to score 5 on 5 with regularity. And last night against a good young Anaheim team, they didn't do that. But I think that more than likely they'll continue to experiment because as I looked at going into the game, Tavares had 2 points during the 6-game road trip. Yeah. Nylander had 3 points. Marner and Matthews produced, but by spreading those guys out over 3 lines, they were hoping to generate more offense from multiple sources. And in the end, they didn't generate anything at all other than power play opportunities. So I'm sure they'll continue that against Detroit. But Detroit's not a team that's going to roll over, and they played the Leafs really tough the last time they played them in Toronto, so that should be a challenge for them.
I don't think the Leafs have deficiencies. I think they have vulnerabilities, Mike, that connect season to season. I mean, it's inherent, and I think getting over the hump as an organization into the playoffs and winning a round with vigor and fervor and confidence will do so much for the group, for management and its general cause and its beliefs and getting it to that point, and then for the fan base too. But between that moment and now, we have a lot of time to talk about the minutia of the team, all the way up to the real things that matter on a nightly basis. One of the best teams in the league. Its power play seems to have sorted itself out, at least for now, and let's keep that going. Sure, we want to see 5-on-5 scoring. The expectation, it'll be there. Now the defensive group not only needs a little more emphasis on grit and capability, but it needs bodies too. So that'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. OG's Converse, just one thing I wanted to mention, if you're into it or not, and I put this in the community platform, youtube.com/Leafs Convo. I want to do one final run of Leafs Convo gear, and then I'll most likely end it forever. If you want to get in on it, all I need you to do is email me, theleafsconvo@gmail.com, or you can get at me in community, but sometimes I'm not in the mood to read them. So just email me. If you want to get a sweater, I don't know, there might be some different colors. I'm going to work on designs. I just want to get a gauge to see who wants one, because I get a lot of random people. Hey, can I get everyone wants something free. Nobody wants to pay for it, but it's like $50 all in with shipping and all that kind of stuff. If you want to get in on it, one last batch of these things, and I probably will never do another round of gear for the Leafs Convo again. If you want to get in on it, let me know so I can gauge the interest, and then I can place an order and we can get everybody that one, final round of swag and paraphernalia so we can remember this wonderful project that is the Leafs Convo. Mike, it's Leafs Red Wings on Saturday. That should be a fun game, as it always is. Last word to you.
Just want to give props to Josh Ho-Sang, who was named to Team Canada for the Olympics in Beijing. Now he was concussed last week, but apparently he'll be okay going forward. I guess the first games are in February the 9th in China. But if you look at the rosters of these teams, I mean, obviously this is, for some people who are looking forward to, Austin Matthews and McDavid going head to head, seeing Eric Stahl and, some veteran guys and some journeymen who are playing in the KHL. That's not exactly, what people were looking for, but Ho-Sang, it was interesting. Elliot Friedman said that Ho-Sang, that the Leafs were going to sign him, or probably were going to sign him to a NHL deal when Marner and Kasha were out, but that he was on the radar for the Olympics. So they chose not to, because if they signed him to the NHL deal, he wouldn't have been able to go to the Olympics. So he may get signed to an NHL deal after the Olympics. And that, I think, is a good move, because he's a talented kid and he seems to have straightened things out, and he's having a good year with the Marlies. Nick Aberzies and Matthew Nyes and Pontus Holmberg are playing for the U.S. and for Sweden in the Olympics. So that's, some prospects getting a good look. And it was just funny scouring the rosters of former Leafs who are playing for the respective countries. Here you go. I'll just do this quickly. Daniel Winnick is playing for Canada. The almighty Corbinian Holzer is playing for Germany. Kenny Agostino is playing for the U.S. Kirill Simonov, who left the Leafs to go back to Russia, is playing for Russia. Leaf draft pick Fabrice Herzog is playing for Switzerland, along with the almighty Dennis Malgin, who every time Mason Marchment scores a goal, I say, well, how's Dennis Malgin doing? Mikko Lehtinen, who played for the Leafs last year, Miro Aaltonen, who's on the Calder Cup winning team in 2018, Uncle Leo for Finland, Martin Dirkels for...
Not that bad. This is not a bad tournament. I'm interested. It's like a group of, where are they nows?
Yeah, Martin Dirkels for Latvia. And last but least, For Slovakia, Martin Marincin.
Unbelievable. What a way to end it. Hey, Mike, summer, I'm in Niagara Falls. Middle of the night, I wake up. It's Israel versus the United States, baseball from Japan. Ian Kinsler at second for the Israelis. And you had David Robertson on the mound for the Americans. And several months down the line, he's at Fenway Park pitching for the Rays in that big game that ended with your Red Sox winning it. So
yeah, I'm really happy about cheater David Ortiz making the Hall of Fame. Way to go.
So he cheats and gets in, and the greatest hitter to ever walk the planet is still castigated and exiled. And
my argument is here.
I'm sorry, like Barry Bonds.
My argument is if you're going to let a obvious cheater, alleged in, because I don't want to get sued, in David Ortiz, if you're going to let him in, then you should have let in. He was let in because he was a nice guy, and Barry Bonds was a dick, so he didn't get let in, and neither did Roger Clemens because he was a jerk.
But it's Barry Bonds. I'm sorry, the most feared hitter that ever lived.
Hey, but Pete Rose isn't in. I mean, this is the thing. If you're going to let David Ortiz, who's a cheater, in,
Pete was betting on games. Like, now that I think back, it's like that was awful. But look, and we will end it. But baseball is not rife with wonderful people. I mean, and pro sports in general, there are tons of scoundrels who are immortalized, and
the all-time.
It'll never come to life, or to light, rather.
Remember that. Okay, this is how fortunate hockey is. The all-time goal leader is Wayne Gretzky, who, even if Leaf fans hate him for 93, which I don't blame you, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Gordie Howe was a great guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Baseball has Ty Cobb, who was purportedly a murderer, and the gambling addict known as Pete Rose. Hockey and baseball. Thank you.
Michael, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll catch up on Sunday. Thank you very much. This is the Leafs Convo, and we're out.